Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be diving deep into the Industrial Revolution.
Ooh,
A period that, totally reshaped how we work, live, and interact with the world.
it did.
If you're into history and how it connects to the present, hit that subscribe button.
Yeah.
You won't regret it. We've got some fascinating excerpts from a text about the Industrial Revolution,
Okay.
ready to unpack the big shifts and surprising connections of this era.
Awesome.
Think about it. We're talking about a world before cars, electricity, and mass production.
Wow.
All things we just take for granted now.
Yeah.
Let's explore how this period of rapid change set the stage for the world we know today.
It's amazing to consider how much of modern life, like our technology jobs, even the structure of cities, originated from this relatively short but incredibly intense period of transformation.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to realize how quickly things changed.
Right.
This wasn't a gradual evolution, it was a full-blown revolution.
Yeah.
Our source really hits on that, asking what was so revolutionary about it.
Well, the text emphasizes the dramatic shift in work itself.
Okay.
It wasn't just about new gadgets. It was a completely new system of production powered by machines rather than human or animal labor.
That makes a lot of sense. The source even includes a link to a YouTube video that shows how powerful modern machinery is.
Oh, cool.
It's a stark reminder of how much we rely on these complex machines in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah.
Imagine a world where everything was still made by hand.
Oh, it would be a completely different pace of life, slower, for sure.
Yeah.
The Industrial Revolution really did transform the world as people knew it back then. It wasn't just about technology either. It impacted society as a whole, economically, socially, and culturally.
While it started in Britain, the Industrial Revolution spread across the globe,
Mm-hmm.
changing the course of history for everyone. Speaking of Britain, our source mentions a historian named Arnold Toynbee.
Okay.
Apparently, he's the one who popularized the term Industrial Revolution in the late 19th century. It's fascinating how one person gets credit for naming such a pivotal era.
Well, Toynbee was a brilliant historian,
Yeah.
and giving this period a name helped people understand its significance.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that the changes were well underway before he coined the term.
Okay, so let's dig into what caused this massive upheaval.
Right.
Our source identifies three main factors: the agrarian revolution,
Okay.
a population explosion,
Mm-hmm.
and a revolution in energy.
Wow.
It sounds like a perfect recipe for change.
Each factor played a crucial role and influenced the others. It's impossible to understand the Industrial Revolution without considering these intertwined causes.
The agrarian revolution is a great place to start. It sounds like farming got a major upgrade.
It did.
Better livestock, breeding new crop varieties,
Okay.
and even inventions like Jethro Tull's seed drill.
Yes. The seed drill is a perfect example of technology impacting even traditional farming practices. Planting seeds by hand seems almost unimaginable now, considering how efficient the seed drill was.
Then there's the enclosure movement, where wealthy landowners bought up smaller farms to create these massive, efficient fields. On one hand, it increased productivity, but it also displaced many small farmers, forcing them to find new opportunities elsewhere.
And that's where the link to factories comes in. Those displaced farmers often migrated to cities,
Right.
creating a workforce for the burgeoning industries. It's a prime example of how interconnected these historical forces were.
Right. It's like one change led directly to another. And you can't forget about the population boom that was happening at the same time,
Oh, yeah.
thanks in part to the increased food production from the agrarian revolution.
Exactly. More food led to more people, and
Right.
all those people needed jobs,
Right.
which the factories of the Industrial Revolution were poised to provide. It was a classic cause and effect scenario.
Now let's talk about the energy revolution.
Mm.
This is where things get really exciting. Our source points out that for most of human history, we relied on human and animal power to get things done. Can you imagine that?
It's hard to fathom now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everything we do today relies on forms of energy that go far beyond our own physical strength. Harnessing new forms of energy was a huge turning point in human history.
The big breakthrough was coal. And our source specifically calls out James Watt and his steam engine as a game changer.
Right.
It's amazing to think that his invention in 1769 was a key driver of the entire Industrial Revolution.
Watt's steam engine was remarkable, but it's important to note that he wasn't working in isolation.
Oh.
Many other brilliant minds were also improving and adapting the steam engine, leading to all sorts of innovative applications.
So we've got coal-powered steam engines powering new factories.
Yeah.
But why did Britain get such a head start? What made them the epicenter of this revolution?
That's a question historians have explored extensively,
Right.
and our source highlights a few key factors. One major advantage was their vast empire built through exploration and colonization.
So they had access to raw materials like cotton sugar and timber from their colonies, which were then shipped back to Britain.
Exactly.
And then those same colonies became markets for the manufactured goods Britain was producing.
It was a brilliant, if somewhat exploitative system for them. Resources fueled industrial growth, which in turn fueled demand for more resources. It's a classic example of how colonialism played a significant role in the Industrial Revolution.
They also had some serious geographical advantages. Being an island nation, Britain had natural harbors that were perfect for trade. Their rivers were not only great for transport, they provided power for those early factories.
Oh, wow.
And to top it off, they had mountains full of coal and iron.
They had all the ingredients needed for an industrial revolution.
Right.
But their success wasn't just about luck. Britain had a stable government that supported businesses and their powerful Navy-protected trade routes. This stability created an environment where businesses could thrive.
It's like they had all their ducks in a row ready for this massive transformation. Our source also mentions private investment as a key factor, highlighting the role of the wealthy middle class who were eager to invest in new ventures.
That's crucial. You need capital to fuel innovation, and Britain had a perfect blend of land, labor, and capital.
Wow.
What economists call the factors of production. They had resources, a growing population, and the money to make it all happen. They certainly did. Now let's shift gears a little bit and look at the specific inventions that really drove this revolution forward. Our source focuses on the textile industry, which became a symbol of this era's technological leaps.
Okay, textiles. The original fashion industry.
Yeah.
Before the revolution, it sounds like textile production was a slow and steady process with spinners and weavers creating everything by hand at home.
It was the epitome of cottage industry, with each garment being handcrafted, often taking weeks or months to complete. But this traditional way of life was about to be completely disrupted.
Our source describes a whirlwind of inventions that changed everything.
Oh, wow.
The flying shuttle, the spinning jenny, the water frame,
and
then the spinning mule. Each one building on the last, making textile production faster and more efficient.
It's like watching a technological arms race unfold, each inventor pushing the boundaries of what was possible. For instance, the spinning mule, while a marvel of efficiency required water power to operate.
Wow.
Leading to a significant shift in how textile production was organized.
And that's where factories come in.
Exactly.
Our source explains how these early textile factories were built along rivers and streams, harnessing the power of water to drive their machines.
The factory system, with its centralized production and division of labor, was truly revolutionary.
Yeah.
It marked a decisive shift from individual craftsmanship to mass production.
Right.
Changing the nature of work forever.
Mass production, that's a huge concept.
It is.
Our source defines it as making large quantities of identical items.
Okay.
It was made possible by two key innovations, interchangeable parts and the assembly line.
Imagine a world where every single part of a machine or product was custom made.
Oh, wow.
If something broke, you'd need a skilled artisan to craft a replacement. Right. Interchangeable parts produced by machines made repair and replacement so much faster and easier.
Wow.
And they paved the way for the assembly line.
So instead of one person making an entire item, each worker on an assembly line focused on a single task.
Yes.
It sounds incredibly efficient. But what was it like to actually work in one of these factories?
Well, the reality was far from ideal. Our source paints a pretty bleak picture of factory life. 12 to 16-hour workdays, dangerous conditions.
Oh my gosh.
And mind-numbingly repetitive tasks.
It's hard to imagine working under those conditions. And it sounds like women and children were especially exploited.
Unfortunately, that's true. Women were paid less than men for the same work, and children, due to their small size, were often used in mines and textile mills, performing tasks that adults couldn't. It was a harsh system, especially for the most vulnerable members of society.
It's heartbreaking to think about. So with all these changes in work and living conditions, did society structure change too?
Absolutely. The Industrial Revolution led to the emergence of a new class structure. At the very top were the industrialists.
Okay.
The factory owners and entrepreneurs who amassed immense wealth.
The new elite, you might say.
Yeah.
What about everyone else?
Below them was the upper middle class,
Okay.
consisting of professionals like doctors and lawyers. Then came the lower middle class, teachers, shopkeepers, and office workers. And at the bottom was the working class, the factory workers who comprised the majority of the population.
It seems like a completely new hierarchy was formed based on wealth and occupation. Our source makes a distinction between middle-class and working-class women,
Right.
suggesting their experiences were quite different.
That's an important point. Middle-class women saw some gains during this era with increased economic opportunities and access to education. However, they were also increasingly confined to the domestic sphere, expected to be wives and mothers above all else. This was the rise of the separate spheres ideology, where women's roles were largely restricted to the home while men dominated the public sphere.
So for middle-class women, it was a bit of a mixed bag. More opportunities, but also more restrictions. What about working-class women? Did their lives improve?
Sadly, not by much. While they had more opportunities for paid work, they were often separated from their families and faced horrendous working conditions in factories and mines. Their overall status didn't see any significant improvement.
It's a stark reminder that progress doesn't always benefit everyone equally. So with these massive shifts in society and economics, how are people grappling with the changing world around them? Were there new ideas about economics emerging during this time?
There were indeed. The Industrial Revolution gave rise to passionate debates about the role of government and the very nature of wealth. Our source highlights some of the key economic theories that emerged during this era.
I'm curious to hear more.
One of the most influential was laissez-faire economics,
Okay.
the idea that the government should not interfere in the free market. This philosophy was championed by Adam Smith, whose book, The Wealth of Nations, became a cornerstone of capitalist thought.
So no government regulation let the market run its course. Didn't he coin the phrase, the invisible hand?
He did. Smith argued that individuals in pursuing their own self-interest within a free market would ultimately benefit society as a whole. He believed that this invisible hand of the market would guide supply and demand, leading to lower prices for consumers and encouraging innovation.
It's a complex idea.
It is.
The idea that individual greed, in a way, could lead to broader social good. It certainly has its critics.
It absolutely does. While Smith's theories have been incredibly influential in shaping economic thought, they've also been debated and challenged over the centuries. But understanding his ideas is crucial to understanding the evolution of capitalism.
Makes sense. So were there other economic perspectives gaining traction at the time? Was everyone on board with this hands-off approach?
Not everyone shared Smith's optimism. Thomas Malthus, for example, offered a much more pessimistic outlook.
What were Malthus's concerns?
In his 1798 essay on the principle of population, Malthus argued that population growth would inevitably outstrip the food supply, leading to widespread poverty and famine. He believed that we were essentially doomed to suffer.
That's a pretty grim prediction. Luckily, it seems he was wrong. I don't think we've had a global famine yet, at least not on the scale he envisioned.
Thankfully, his predictions have not come to pass. Food production has managed to keep pace with population growth, although it remains a critical issue. But Malthus's work reflects the anxieties of the time, the fear that these rapid changes might lead to social and economic instability.
So if laissez-faire capitalism represented one end of the spectrum, what was on the other end? Were there people who believed the entire system needed a major overhaul?
You bet. This was the era when socialist thought began to take root. Socialism, broadly speaking, is the idea that the means of production, things like factories, land, and resources, should be owned and controlled collectively rather than by private individuals.
So the opposite of capitalism, where everything is privately owned. What were the socialists' main critiques of the industrial system?
They argued that industrial capitalism, while creating vast wealth, also created a massive gap between the rich and the poor. They saw the working class being exploited, and they believed in a more equitable system where wealth and resources were shared more fairly.
So essentially, the socialists wanted to level the playing field. Do they have any concrete ideas about how to achieve that?
There were different branches of socialist thought, each with their own approaches. One early form was utopian socialism. Utopian socialists envisioned creating ideal communities where everyone would share work and resources, equally living in peace and harmony.
Sounds like a hopeful vision.
Yeah.
Were there any successful utopian communities?
There were a number of attempts, but most were short-lived. One notable example was Robert Owen, a British industrialist who established a utopian community in Scotland. He provided his workers with decent housing, fair wages, and education, trying to create a model for a more just society.
That's admirable.
Yeah.
What happened to his community? Why didn't it last?
These utopian communities often struggled to be self-sufficient,
Right.
and they were often seen as radical and threatening by the established order. But they represent an important early item to address the inequalities generated by industrial capitalism.
So utopian socialism was a noble but ultimately flawed experiment. What came next? in the evolution of socialist thought?
Well, around the mid-19th century, Karl Marx
Okay.
and Friedrich Engels entered the scene with a new brand of socialism they called scientific socialism.
I've definitely heard of them.
Yeah, they outlined their ideas in a book that became quite famous,
Right.
the Communist Manifesto.
Ah, yes, Communist Manifesto. That's the one that urges workers of the world to unite.
That's the one Marx and Engels viewed history as a constant struggle between classes.
Okay.
In the industrial era, this struggle was between the bourgeoisie, the capitalists who own the means of production,
Right.
and the proletariat, the working class.
So basically, owners versus workers.
Exactly. Marx and Engels believed that this class conflict would inevitably lead to a revolution, where the workers would overthrow the capitalists and establish a classless society. Everyone would share equally in the fruits of their labor.
That's a pretty radical idea.
Yeah.
Did this worker revolution ever actually happen?
Well, it depends on how you define revolution.
Right.
There were certainly worker uprisings and social movements inspired by Marx's ideas, but the first real attempt to build a communist state was the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution in Russia.
The Russian Revolution was a major turning point in history, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And it's fascinating to see how it stemmed from the same social and economic forces we've been discussing.
Right.
The forces unleashed by the Industrial Revolution. It's like a ripple effect that spread across the globe.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from those early farming innovations to the rise of factories and the birth of new economic theories.
Yeah.
It's incredible to see how all these pieces fit together.
It's been quite a journey. And it's important to remember that the Industrial Revolution wasn't just a single event.
Right. It was a process of change that unfolded over decades and even centuries. And its impacts are still felt today.
So what are the key takeaways? What's essential to understand about the Industrial Revolution?
Firstly, it fundamentally transformed how we work.
Right.
The shift from handmade to machine-made, from cottage industries to factories, was a pivotal change in human history.
And those changes in work led to massive social transformations like urbanization, a new class structure, and a whole host of new social problems.
Exactly. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just an economic phenomenon.
Yeah.
It reshaped society and culture, too. And it ignited debates about how to organize society and distribute wealth, debates that are still relevant today.
It's remarkable to think how much of our modern world is rooted in this period. It makes you wonder what lessons we can learn from the Industrial Revolution and apply to the rapid technological changes happening now.
That's a crucial question. We're in another era of major technological disruption, with artificial intelligence, automation, and globalization reshaping the world. Understanding the past,
Its successes and its failures can guide us as we navigate these new challenges.
it seems like the big lesson is to ensure that progress benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah.
We need to protect workers and prevent the mistakes of the past from repeating themselves. It's really up to us to shape the future we want.
Well said. The Industrial Revolution was a turning point in human history, and its legacy continues to unfold. By understanding the past, we can better address the challenges and opportunities of the present and work towards a more just and sustainable future.
This deep dive into the Industrial Revolution has been incredibly insightful. If you enjoyed it and want to explore more fascinating topics, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.